2 weeks ago, my wife went to visit our daughter and my son-in-law, and I decided to give them a surprise and go too. When I approached the door of their house, a neighbor shouted, "Wait, I have something to tell you." 5 minutes later, the police arrived, and the consequences put everything upside down. Before continuing, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The highway stretched in front of me like a sentence that could not end. I, Robert, had never felt that this journey was so long, although I had driven it dozens of times over the years. My hand squeezed the steering wheel with more force than necessary, with my pale knuckles against the black leather. The phone was in the cup holder, with the dark screen mocking me with its silence. 3 days. Mary never spent 3 days without returning a call. I looked at the phone again, knowing that I would not see anything new, but checking anyway. The same unanswered text messages, the same voicemails delivered to the void. The last one I had left that morning sounded desperate, even to my own ears. "Mary, I'm worried. Just let me know you're okay. Call me, please." The surprise visit had seemed like a good idea yesterday. Drive to the big city, Chicago, appear with flowers, take Mary and Marissa to have lunch somewhere nice, spend the day together. But somewhere around mile 60, the surprise began to feel less like a gift and more like an emergency response. The exit signs counted the distance. 80 kilometers to get there, 60, 50. My mind was still going back to the months before Mary left for this visit. Marissa's phone calls had changed. Not in frequency, she had always been good about checking in, but in content. Every conversation was eventually heading toward money. "The roof needs repairs. James's contracting job has slowed down. Could you help us with the mortgage this month?" And then, more recently, questions that left a bad taste in my mouth. "Mom, Dad, have you and Mom thought about updating your will? You know, with the value of properties changing and all that?" I had mentioned it to Mary after that particular call. She was folding clothes in our bedroom with paused and precise movements. "It's our daughter, Robert," she had said without looking up. "She's just having a bad streak. We also have a bad streak, remember?" I remembered. But something about Marissa's tone felt different. Calculated, maybe. Or maybe I was just becoming paranoid in my old age, seeing shadows where there were only ordinary family struggles. The exit to the city appeared. I merged to the right, following the ramp to the suburban sprawl. The strip malls and chain restaurants gave way to residential streets lined by identical 2-story houses. Marissa's neighborhood looked the same as always. Tidy lawns, basketball hoops at the driveways, family SUVs parked at careful angles. Her house was at the end of a cul-de-sac. The grass had been cut recently, leaving perfect parallel stripes on the turf. There were no newspapers littering the entrance. Nothing seemed disturbed or out of place. I approached the curb and turned off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe Mary had dropped her phone in Marissa's swimming pool. Or she had forgotten it in a diner. Or she had simply let herself be carried away by mother-daughter time and forgot to charge it. There were simple explanations. They had to exist. I got out and walked to the front door. The concrete path felt solid under my shoes. Normal. I reached the doorbell and pressed it, hearing the chime echo inside the house. I waited. I counted to 30. I pressed it again. Nothing. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I put my hands against the front window and peered through the glass. The living room looked empty. The furniture arranged exactly as I remembered it from our last visit at the end-of-year holidays. No lights on. No movement. I took out my phone and dialed Marissa's number. It rang 4 times. Then it went to the voicemail, her cheerful recorded voice. "Hi, I'm Marissa. I can't answer now, but leave a message and I'll call you super soon. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I tried James. The same result. Direct to voicemail after several rings. His message was shorter, more professional. James Miller, leave your name and number. The anxiety that had been growing since I left my city crystallized into something more acute. Where were they? Marissa knew that I might visit. I had mentioned it vaguely during our last conversation. She always answered her phone. Always. Excuse me. Wait. I turned around. A man was running across the lawn from the house next door, moving with purpose. About 40 years old, with thinning hair, dressed in a polo shirt and khaki pants. His expression carried an urgency that did not match the quiet suburban afternoon. "Are you a relative?" he shouted, slightly out of breath. "Are you Mary's husband?" The question stopped me. How did this stranger know Mary's name? He reached me and extended his hand, although the gesture seemed automatic. Something he did while his mind was working on more important matters. "I'm Mark Johnson. I live next door." He pointed to the house he had just left. "Listen, I need to tell you something. About a week ago, something happened here." He looked at Marissa's house, then at me, tensing his jaw as he chose his words. "There were screams," he finally said, "late at night." "A woman's voice?" My chest tightened. Mark did not expect me to ask questions. The words came out rushed, as if he had been holding them in for too long. It was around midnight, maybe a little later, a week ago, on June the 8th. I remember it because it was the night before my daughter's birthday. I heard screams coming from this house. He gestured toward Marissa's front windows. Not just loud voices, screams. A woman begging someone to call an ambulance, saying she needed help. I felt the floor move beneath my feet. Subtle but unmistakable. I got up. I went to my front window, Mark continued. Marissa and James came out. Right there on the lawn. They shouted at the house, saying everything was fine, that it was just a nightmare, that there was no emergency. But those screams. He shook his head. That was not a nightmare. I've heard nightmares wake people up. This was horror. "What did you do?" The question came out rushed. I called 911 anyway. I told them someone needed help at this address. Marissa and James saw me on the phone through the window, and they started making signals for me to stop. But I had already made the call. He crossed his arms, defensive now, as if waiting for me to criticize the decision. The paramedics arrived maybe 10 minutes later. They went in with Marissa and James. When they left again, they carried a woman out on a gurney. She could barely lift her head. It was Mary. The world narrowed to Mark's face, his mouth forming words that could not be real. "She was barely conscious," he said. The paramedics moved fast, checking her vital signs, asking Marissa questions. Their daughter and her husband just stood there looking. They did not get in the ambulance. They didn't even follow her to the hospital. They went back inside. And the next morning, both cars were gone. I haven't seen them since then. My hands were shaking. I looked at them, surprised by the tremor. Then I looked at Mark again. "Which hospital?" "I don't know," he hesitated. I assumed that the family would take care of it, that someone would contact you." I took out my phone. I called Marissa again. Voicemail. James, voicemail. I called 911, forcing my voice to stay firm while I identified myself and asked about ambulance calls to this address a week ago. The operator put me on hold. Incongruently cheerful elevator music played. Mark stood watching me, his concern etched more deeply now that he had said everything out loud. "Emergency services, how can I help you?" I called about an ambulance dispatch. 847 Pine Street, on June the 8th, I said. The patient was my wife, Mary Smith. I need to know which hospital she was taken to. Keys jingled on the other end. Metropolitan General Hospital, sir. The call came in at 12:43 in the morning. Thank you. I hung up and immediately called the hospital. 3 transfers. 3 different voices asking me to hold. Finally, a nurse in the intensive care unit with a tired and professional tone. Mary Smith. Yes. She was admitted on June the 8th. Serious condition, but stable since yesterday. What happened to her? I can't give details over the phone, sir. You'll have to come in person. Are you a relative? I am her husband. A pause. 4th floor ICU. Ask for the head nurse when you arrive. Mark was watching me, waiting. I'm going to call the police, I told him. This isn't right. He agreed immediately. I'll give a statement, whatever you need. I called the police department. I reported a possible crime. I gave the address. I explained what Mark had witnessed. The officer on the line told me that someone would meet me at the hospital. I was already moving toward my car. The hospital is on the main avenue, Mark shouted after me. Take the road heading east. I'll find you there. I got in. I started the engine. I pulled away from the curb without looking back. The drive felt surreal. Traffic lights changed color. People crossed the streets with shopping bags and cups of coffee, going about their ordinary Tuesdays while my whole world split in two. What happened to Mary? Why didn't Marissa call an ambulance for her own mother? Why did they run away? The questions multiplied faster than my speedometer went up. Metropolitan General Hospital, towering against the horizon, all glass and concrete angles. I parked in the visitor's lot. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. I followed the signs to the ICU. A woman in civilian clothes was waiting near the nurse station. A detective's badge was clipped to her belt. Mr. Smith, she extended her hand. Detective Patricia Vega. I received the call about your wife's situation. Where is she? Room 412. But I need to ask you a few questions first. When was the last time you spoke to Mary? 2 weeks ago, when she went to visit our daughter. We sent each other text messages a couple of times after that. Then, 3 days ago, she stopped answering. Vega wrote in a small notebook. And you didn't know she was hospitalized? No one contacted me. I came here because I was worried. A neighbor told me what happened. Her expression changed, a professional mask sliding long enough to show something darker underneath. Your wife suffered severe poisoning, Mr. Smith, a combination of sedatives and heart medication. The dose was potentially lethal. She has been unconscious most of the week. We have been trying to locate next of kin. The words landed like physical blows. My daughter and my son-in-law were with her, I said slowly. The neighbor heard her screaming for help. They told him it was nothing. Then they disappeared. Does that sound like an accident to you, detective? Vega's jaw strained. Room 412. Go see your wife. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. The ICU room was subdued. Half-closed blinds, machines beeping constantly, monitoring vital signs with mechanical precision. Mary lay in the bed, tubes and wires connecting her to equipment I didn't want to understand. Her face looked smaller than I remembered. Pale skin against white pillows. I pulled up a chair and took her hand. She felt fragile, like bird bones. I'm here now, I said in a low voice. The words were for her, even if she couldn't hear them. When you wake up, you'll tell me what they did. And I promise you, my voice went lower, harder. I'll make sure they answer for every second of this. Something changed inside me then. The shocked father evaporated. In his place, the prosecutor who had been a district attorney for 30 years appeared. The man who built cases brick by brick, who found patterns in chaos, who knew exactly how to make people account for their actions. Marissa and James had made a mistake. They had left evidence. They had left witnesses. They had left their victim alive. And they had underestimated me. I didn't leave the chair next to her bed. Nurses offered alternatives, a cot in the waiting room, a nearby hotel with a family discount. But I refused. My hand was wrapped around Mary's, feeling for any change, any sign that she was coming back. Around 5 in the morning, her fingers moved against my palm. I straightened up. I leaned closer. Her eyelids fluttered, fighting against whatever darkness held her back. A nurse noticed. She moved quickly toward the monitors, checked readings, pressed a call button. In minutes, a doctor arrived, flashlight in hand, examining Mary's responses with clinical efficiency. Her eyes opened. Out of focus at first, pupils adjusting to the dim light. Then they found my face and stayed there. "Robert?" The word came out harsh, barely recognizable through the damage left by a ventilation tube. "Where?" The nurse brought water. She held the cup while Mary took small sips. Her throat worked painfully, but the sound gradually returned. "How long have I been here?" "A week." Words felt inadequate. "I've been here a week?" Her eyes widened, confusion mingling with fear. I saw her trying to rebuild the time she had lost, grasping at memories that scattered like smoke. The doctor confirmed that she was stable enough to speak. Detective Vega appeared shortly after, recording device in hand. Professional expression, but not unkind. Mary described what she could remember. Her voice trembled through the story. Marissa had made dinner on June the 8th. Nothing fancy. Pasta with tomato sauce and vegetables, garlic bread. About an hour after eating, something went wrong. Dizziness first, then nausea. Then her heart beating so fast that she couldn't catch her breath. "I asked Marissa to call an ambulance," Mary said, looking down at her hands. "She said no. She said it was just food poisoning, that I would feel better if I lay down." But it got worse. Everything was spinning, and my chest hurt so much I thought... She stopped, swallowed. I begged her. I said, "Marissa, please. Something is wrong with my heart." She just looked at James, and he stood in front of the door. He wouldn't let me leave the room. I sat motionless, absorbing every word like a blow. "I screamed for help," Mary continued. "I thought maybe someone outside would hear. Then everything went dark. I remember a voice through the window. Someone calling. But after that, nothing. Just waking up here now." Detective Vega stopped the recording. She gave Mary a moment before speaking. "Toxicology shows levels of Ambien and digoxin that would kill most people your age, Mrs. Smith. Someone with medical knowledge would understand exactly what that combination does. This was not accidental." "What are those?" Mary asked, although her face suggested she really didn't want to know. "A sleep aid and heart medication," Vega said. "Neither was prescribed to you. Do you know if Marissa or James had access to those drugs?" Mary's forehead wrinkled. "There were pill bottles in their bathroom. I saw them when I got there. James mentioned something about anxiety and sleep issues, but I didn't pay much attention." The detective took notes, asked follow-up questions, establishing details of the timeline that would matter in court. I listened, building my own mental file of each fact, each inconsistency. "I need to conduct interviews," Vega said eventually. "Marissa and James Miller just returned home. Apparently they took a trip." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I'm going with you," I said, already getting up. "Mr. Smith, this is official police business. Given your relationship with the victim and the suspects, They're not suspects. They're criminals who tried to murder my wife. Vega's expression softened slightly. Which is exactly why you cannot be present during the interrogation. I understand your frustration, but we need to do this right. Let me handle it. She was right, and I knew it. Decades in the prosecutor's office taught me the importance of clean investigations, unstained evidence. I sat down again. Hours passed. Mary drifted in and out of sleep, exhausted by the effort of consciousness. I held her hand. I watched the machines track her vital signs. I tried not to imagine James standing between her and the door while she begged for help. Detective Vega returned at the end of the afternoon. Her expression told me everything before she spoke. They admit Mary was sick that night, she said, pulling up a chair. But their story is that she took the pills herself. They say she couldn't sleep, that she was stressed about family finances. They claim they were about to call an ambulance when the neighbor, quote, interfered. They went to some tourist islands the next day because the trip was pre-planned, and they didn't realize how serious the situation was since the hospital said Mary was stable. That's a lie. Mary's voice was louder now, but trembled with anger. I think so, Vega said. But their story is coordinated, rehearsed. A defense attorney could argue that the poisoning caused confusion, affected her memory of events. Right now, it's her word against theirs. We need more. After she left, I sat in silence. 30 years in the DA's office had prepared me for this moment, though I never imagined applying that knowledge to my own family. The investigation will take months. The evidence is circumstantial. Even if charges are brought, a conviction is not guaranteed. And in the meantime, Marissa and James would walk free, acting innocent, telling their version to anyone who would listen. I looked at Mary, fragile and traumatized in the hospital bed. Then I took out my phone and searched through the contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. David Stevens. A private investigator who had worked dozens of cases with me during my DA days, uncovering financial records and hidden connections that turned circumstantial cases into convictions. I pressed call. David, it's Robert Smith. I need your help with something. It's personal. The coffee shop in my city was almost empty on a Thursday morning. David Stevens sat across from me, 3 folders spread out among our mugs. His expression was grim as he explained what he had found in just 2 days. Your daughter made 47 calls to creditors in the last 3 months, he said, sliding the first folder forward. Tax agencies, credit card companies, mortgage administrators. Every account is past due, most for 60 days or more. I opened the folder. Phone records, bank statements, credit reports. All the financial debris of a crumbling life. James owed money everywhere. Online gambling sites, sports betting, poker rooms in several cities. The numbers kept climbing. $85,000 in credit card debt, David continued. Another $120,000 in gambling losses across various platforms. Their mortgage is 2 months late. Foreclosure proceedings began last week. And Marissa knew all this? I asked. Although I already suspected the answer. She called your estate lawyer 4 weeks before the poisoning, on June the 10th. She asked about the deadlines for a will. What happens when someone dies intestate versus with a will? Whether adult children automatically inherit. The lawyer thought she was just curious about family planning. David paused. That's not curiosity, Robert. That's planning. I closed the folder. The pieces falling into a pattern I recognized from dozens of prosecutions. Financial desperation plus opportunity equals motive. But knowing it and proving it in court were different challenges. From the coffee shop, I drove to the downtown office of Mr. George Harrison. Harrison had been my resource for complex cases requiring expertise in civil litigation. The kind of lawyer who understood how to apply pressure from multiple angles. His office had floor-to-ceiling windows. Harrison sat behind his desk, reading David's report with the intensity that made him successful. "Criminal court requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt," he finally said. The prosecutor could have difficulties with that, given the coordinated stonewalling and Mary's memory gaps. But civil court? Preponderance of the evidence, 50% and 1%. We can prove this in the civil sphere even if the criminal charges fail. And we can make their lives very uncomfortable in the process. What are you suggesting? A lawsuit for wrongful injury, emotional distress, medical expenses? We freeze their assets during discovery. We force them to answer questions under oath. We expose every financial motive to criminal investigators. Civil litigation can be a powerful weapon when used strategically. He leaned back, fingers laced. "And I assume you want this done aggressively." "I want it done correctly," I said. "But yes, aggressively." Harrison smiled, not with warmth, but with recognition of a shared purpose. "I'll have the papers drafted by the end of the day." My next stop was the estate lawyer's office, a smaller practice. Mr. Allen had handled our wills 5 years ago. Simple documents that left everything one to the other, then to Marissa after both of us died. "I need changes," I told him, after explaining the situation. "Cut Marissa out completely. Everything goes to Mary, then to charity if she dies before me. And add a clause that if Marissa contests this will, she loses any claim at all." Allen's pen moved across the legal pad, taking notes. "You want a non-contest clause. Standard practice when there's concern about challenges. Can I have a revised will ready for signature tomorrow?" "Today," I said. Mary was now home. The discharge from the hospital was both a relief and a burden. She was still weak, easily tired, requiring constant care. I sat across from her on the sofa. "The evidence suggests it, Mary." Her hands were shaking slightly. "Did she really plan it? She kept telling you she was just going through a bad time. That she never..." She was so wrong. I sat next to her, careful not to touch her without permission. Hospital experiences leave invisible boundaries. You weren't wrong in loving your daughter. She was wrong in betraying that love. We sat in silence for several minutes. Then Mary straightened up, something hardening in her expression. "What's the next step?" I explained Harrison's strategy, the civil suit, the asset freeze, the discovery process that would expose everything. Mary listened without interruption. Then she nodded once. "Do it." On Friday morning, I called Marissa's number. She answered on the second ring with a carefully bright voice. "Daddy, how is Mom? I've been so worried." "Your mother needs family right now," I interrupted, keeping my tone neutral. "I think we should talk. All of us together, face to face. Can you and James come this weekend? We need to figure out what happened." A pause. I could almost hear her calculating, deciding how to play this. "Of course," she finally said. "We want to help in any way we can. Does Saturday work?" "Saturday is perfect. Come around noon." After hanging up, I signed the authorization form for Harrison's lawsuit. On Monday morning, Marissa and James would be served the papers. But first, I wanted to see their faces when they thought they had gotten away with it. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I wrote my name. No regret. Just recognition of the moment when everything would change. The civil complaint sat on my desk, 38 pages of accusations that read like an indictment. Which, in a sense, it was. George Harrison had done an excellent job. Every charge backed by medical records, every dollar of damages calculated with precision. $2 million in compensatory and punitive damages for attempted murder, intentionally inflicting emotional distress, medical expenses approaching $200,000. Harrison's voice came over the speakerphone. We're filing within the hour. Once the process server delivers this to their door, there's no going back. Are you sure about this? File it. Understood. I'll call you after service is complete. I hung up and imagined the scene. The process server approaching Marissa's house, knocking on the door, handing over the thick manila envelope. Her opening it, scanning the first page, seeing the words attempted murder and $2 million in bold. The satisfaction I felt was cold, methodical. This was step one. The call came 3 hours later, not from Harrison, but from Marissa. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my voice level. Yes? $2 million? Her shriek came through, sharp enough to hurt. Daddy, you've lost your mind. This is insane. It was an accident. Mom took those pills herself because she couldn't sleep. You're ruining our lives over a misunderstanding. The same rehearsed explanation she had given the detective. I let her continue, listening for inconsistencies, cataloging every claim. We were trying to help her. She was stressed about money, about the house, and she took too many pills. We were about to call for help when that nosy neighbor interfered. Now you're suing us? Your own daughter? She paused for air. I spoke into the silence. You had a choice that night, Marissa. When your mother was screaming for help, begging you to call an ambulance, you made a decision. You chose to let her suffer. Now you will answer for that choice in court. Her tone instantly changed from hysteria to fury. You are destroying my life for nothing. We are your family. Family doesn't leave family to die for inheritance money. I ended the call. 20 minutes passed before my phone rang again. James this time. I answered without greeting. His voice came out careful, modulated. The tone of someone trying to negotiate a business deal. Robert, listen. I know this is your side, but we can work this out, right? Families should handle things privately. What if there's a way to make this go away? We could agree to certain terms, maybe some financial arrangement. I walked to the window, looked out over the downtown skyline as James's desperate pitch continued. When he finally stopped, I responded, Are you offering me money? With what? With the $85,000 you owe on credit cards? The $120,000 in gambling debts? Or were you planning on using the inheritance you thought you'd get when Mary died? Silence. Then, in a voice stripped of its careful tone, How do you know? What are you talking about? I didn't answer the question. No deal, James. I'll see you in court. Another call ended. Detective Vega called that afternoon. We executed the search warrant this morning. Found a few interesting items. Empty prescription bottle in the master bathroom cabinet. Ambien, sleep medication, prescribed to James 3 months ago, 30 pills. The bottle is completely empty, and his fingerprints are all over it. She paused. But here's the real evidence. James's laptop. Browser history from 3 weeks before the poisoning. Search for digoxin overdose symptoms and lethal dose of sleeping pills. He researched exactly what happened to your wife before it happened. That's premeditation, Mr. Smith. I took notes as she spoke. Prosecutor shorthand covering the legal pad. Dates, search terms, prescription details, the planning timeline. The DA is preparing arrest warrants now, Vega continued. First-degree attempted murder for both of them, plus conspiracy and obstruction for the false statements. We're moving on this tonight. Good work, Detective. I appreciate it. The second call from Vega came at 7 that evening. They're in custody. Both arrested at the house an hour ago. being processed now, bail hearings tomorrow morning. But given the charges and their financial situation creating a flight risk, bail will be set high. Mary was next to me, holding my hand. She had listened to everything over the speakerphone. Her eyes were damp. No tears fell. "Is it wrong that I feel relieved?" she asked quietly. I squeezed her hand. "No, it means justice is working." My phone vibrated with a text from Harrison. "Arrest warrants executed. Civil case now has criminal charges backing it. Motion hearing for asset freeze scheduled in 3 days." Are we winning? I read the message. Then I looked at Mary. She was staring at a framed photo on the side table. Marissa at 7 years old, a gap-toothed smile, sitting on my shoulders at the beach. Mary reached for it, hesitated, her fingers an inch from the frame. Then she deliberately turned it face down. "I can't look at her right now," she whispered. I nodded. Neither could I. The bail hearing occurred on Wednesday morning. Marissa and James appeared via video link from the county jail, both in orange jumpsuits that looked deliberately humbling on camera. The judge set bail at $250,000 each. High, but not insurmountable. By Thursday afternoon, they had posted bail through a bondsman, putting up their house as collateral. By Friday, they had hired attorney Morales. Morales' reputation preceded him. Ex-public defender turned high-profile criminal attorney, known for aggressive tactics and media manipulation. His strategy became clear within hours of taking the case. The local newspaper ran the story on Saturday morning. Front page: Father sues daughter for $2 million after alleged poisoning. Defense claims tragic accident. The article presented both sides with careful neutrality, but the photo told a different story. Marissa looking exhausted and fragile, tears visible on her cheeks. No photo of Mary in the hospital bed. Sunday brought the real offensive. The paper ran a follow-up interview. Marissa and James sitting in their living room, talking directly to a reporter about the tragic misunderstanding tearing their family apart. I read it at the kitchen table while Mary made breakfast. Marissa described a wonderful visit with her mother that took a terrible turn when Mary grew anxious about finances and took sleeping pills without telling anyone. James explained they were moments from calling for help when the neighbor unnecessarily panicked. Both expressed shock and sorrow that Robert refused to believe them, choosing instead to destroy his own daughter's life with false accusations. The article included quotes from their lawyer. Morales positioned them as victims twice over. First of Mary's accidental overdose, now of Robert's vindictive lawsuit fueled by paranoia rather than evidence. "Listen to this," I said to Mary. Morales claims we're using the legal system as a weapon to punish grieving family members who made difficult decisions in a crisis. Mary set her coffee cup down harder than necessary. "Difficult decisions? They watched me beg for help and did nothing." "I know. Then why does reading this make me feel like we're the ones who did something wrong?" Because that was exactly what Morales wanted. To shape the narrative before trial. To make the jury pool question whether attempted murder was really just panic and bad judgment. Classic defense strategy. My phone began to ring that afternoon. Friends, mostly. Former colleagues from the DA's office. People who had known me for decades, calling with carefully phrased questions. Richard Martin, a retired judge, spoke with diplomatic caution. "Robert, I saw the article. Obviously, I know there are two sides to every story. But have you considered that perhaps emotions are running high? Family disputes can look clearer than they actually are." I explained the evidence. Browser history, prescription bottle, financial motive. Richard listened, making sympathetic noises. But I heard doubt in the pauses. Carol, who had worked as a victim advocate during my prosecutorial years, tried a different approach. "I'm not questioning your judgment. But is it possible that Mary's memory was impacted by the trauma? Sometimes victims fill in the blanks with assumptions that feel like certainties. More phone calls followed, each carefully supportive on the surface, questioning underneath. The media campaign was working. Harrison called Monday morning with news. Morales filed a countersuit. They're suing you and Mary for defamation, alleging your false accusations have destroyed Marissa's reputation and James's contracting business. They're asking for $500,000. That's absurd. Of course it is. It's harassment litigation, designed to create leverage, to make you back off. But combined with the media coverage, it's building a narrative that could resonate with a jury. We need to be ready for this to get uglier. The asset freeze hearing was scheduled for Wednesday. Harrison explained the strategy. We would present evidence of financial motive. We would argue that Marissa and James might conceal or transfer assets to avoid paying damages. The court could freeze their accounts, prevent property transfers, protecting our eventual judgment. But first, we had to survive the pressure. Tuesday afternoon, I ran into Tom at the grocery store. Tom had been in my book club for 15 years. He saw me, hesitated visibly, then approached with an expression I had seen before on witnesses who didn't want to testify. "Robert, how are you holding up?" "Getting through it. I read about everything in the paper. Must be tough." He shifted his weight, looked at the floor. "Listen, I don't want to overstep, but have you thought about mediation? Sometimes these family things look clearer when you're angry. Maybe there's room for—" "Tom, my daughter tried to kill my wife for inheritance money. That's not a misunderstanding." His face flushed. "Of course not. I'm just saying." "Well, the article made it sound more complicated than—" "The article was written by Marissa's defense lawyer." "Right. Sure. I hope it works out." He left quickly, abandoning his half-full cart. That night, Mary found me at my desk reviewing evidence files. She sat across from me, her expression firm despite the visible exhaustion in her eyes. "People are questioning you," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Some are. Do you doubt yourself?" I looked at her, still fragile from the ordeal, still recovering, but with clearer eyes than I had seen on her in weeks. "Sometimes," I admitted. "When enough people suggest you're wrong, you start to wonder." "Then let me be clear," Mary said. "I begged our daughter for help while I was dying, and she refused. That's not complicated. That's not a misunderstanding. That's attempted murder." She leaned forward. "Don't let them make you forget what really happened." The doubt didn't completely disappear, but her certainty stabilized something inside me. The Wednesday hearing would tell us if the court saw things as clearly as we did. The call from Detective Vega came on Wednesday morning as I was reviewing case files on the kitchen counter. "James cracked," she said, without preamble, "during the follow-up interview this morning. I was pressing on inconsistencies between his statement and Marissa's, asking whose idea certain things were. And he just broke. Grabbed a pen, ready to take notes. What did he say? I quote, "It was my idea to solve our financial problems, okay? But Marissa agreed. She knew what we were doing." Then his lawyer intervened, demanded we stop, but it was already on tape. I underlined the words in my notebook. My idea. Marissa agreed. She knew. "That's premeditation," I said. "And conspiracy." Exactly. Their defense just collapsed from the inside. After hanging up, I called George Harrison. He had already heard from his sources in the DA's office, but had additional information on what happened after James's slip. "Morales got them both into a conference room at the station," Harrison said. "Tried to have a private conversation about damage control. According to the officers outside, Marissa's voice was audible through the door. She was screaming at James, calling him weak, asking how he could be so stupid as to tell the police that. And James? He yelled back that she wanted the money just as much as he did, that she helped plan the whole thing. So why should he take the blame alone? Morales couldn't control them. They turned on each other right there. Harrison paused. Two defendants blaming each other is a prosecutor's dream. Robert, you know that. I knew it. I had built cases on exactly this kind of fracture throughout my career, pressuring defendants until loyalty gave way to self-preservation. It always worked. Harrison eventually called back that afternoon with a proposal. The DA's office wants to make a tactical move. They're going to extend an offer to James through his lawyer. Reduce the charges in exchange for full testimony against Marissa. Conspiracy instead of attempted murder. 8 to 10 years instead of 15 to 20. James is the weak link, I said, thinking through the strategy. He's already cracking. He's already terrified. His gambling addiction, his pattern of bad decisions under pressure. He'll take the deal. But we need your authorization to coordinate with the prosecutor. I walked to the study window, looked out at the evening light. Using James to convict Marissa felt calculated, manipulative. But then I recalled Mary's account. James standing in front of the door while she begged for help, blocking her escape. The methodical cruelty of that moment. Make the offer, I said. The offer reached James the next morning. Harrison reported that James was seriously considering it, despite Morales' advice to fight it at trial. Morales argued that turning on Marissa would make James look worse to a jury. But James was caught between the fear of prison and the fear of being labeled a traitor. He asked for 48 hours to decide. While James deliberated, Marissa made her own move. She hired a separate attorney, a woman named Attorney Solis, citing conflict of interest. Morales couldn't represent both defendants if their interests diverged. Solis immediately filed a motion suggesting James was the primary actor, and Marissa had been coerced or manipulated by an abusive husband. Harrison explained it to me over the phone with something approaching dark admiration. It's legally weak, given the evidence, but it shows she's ruthless. She's willing to completely destroy James to save herself, fighting like someone who has nothing to lose. Which she doesn't, I said. Exactly. That night I sat with Mary in the living room and explained the developments. James's slip during interrogation, the plea offer, Marissa's counter-strategy of blaming him for everything. Mary listened without interruption. Then she asked a question that surprised me. If James testifies against Marissa, will she definitely be convicted? I considered it honestly. Not definitely, but probably. His testimony combined with the laptop, the evidence, the prescriptions, your account, it builds a very strong case. She nodded slowly. Then I hope he takes the deal. Not because I want James to suffer less, but because I want to be absolutely certain Marissa is held accountable. The clarity in her voice reminded me why I was doing this. Not for vengeance, though that element existed. For certainty. For making sure what happened to her carried permanent consequences. My phone rang late that night, past 11. Harrison's number on the screen. James's lawyer just called, he said, his voice taut with controlled excitement. He's taking the deal. Full testimony. Total cooperation. He's handing us Marissa on a silver platter. I closed my eyes, absorbed the information. Across the room, Mary looked at me inquiringly. I covered the phone. James is going to testify against her. Mary's expression didn't change, but her hand gripped the armrest of her chair, knuckles showing white against the fabric. Harrison continued. We're scheduling his deposition in 3 days. Once he's on the record, Marissa's defense is finished. She'll know it too. After hanging up, I sat in silence with Mary. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she said what we were both thinking. "It's really happening." "Yes," I said. "It is." The motion to freeze assets was heard on Monday morning. I had spent the previous day coordinating with Harrison, reviewing the financial analysis David Stevens had prepared. Every debt, every missed payment, every desperate cash advance in the 6 months before the poisoning. The documents showed a family drowning and grasping at the inheritance that would save them. The hearing occurred on Wednesday afternoon. Judge Garcia presided, reviewing the evidence with the methodical attention judges give to financial matters. Harrison presented our case. $205,000 in combined debt. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. Marissa's call to the estate lawyer 4 weeks before the poisoning. The pattern was undeniable. Marissa's lawyer, Solis, argued that freezing the assets would prevent them from paying their mortgage, essentially guaranteeing foreclosure. Harrison countered that they had already stopped making payments 3 months ago. The freeze simply formalized what was already happening. Judge Garcia granted the motion, all bank accounts frozen, no property transfers allowed. The house they had pledged for bail was now untouchable, caught in a legal limbo. "They're financially paralyzed," Harrison told me afterward. "Can't sell, can't borrow, can't access savings. Everything they own is frozen until the civil case is resolved." James's deposition was scheduled for Friday. I did not attend. Harrison advised against it, saying my presence could complicate matters. Instead, I waited at home while Harrison and the assistant DA handled it. He called me Friday evening with a summary. "James gave us everything," Harrison said. 47 pages of testimony. He described researching the drugs online, finding the prescription bottle from his anxiety treatment, falsifying a second prescription for digoxin using his doctor's prescription pad during an appointment. He explained mixing both medications into Mary's pasta sauce. And he detailed every conversation with Marissa. How they discussed it for weeks. How she agreed it was the only solution to their debts. How she watched him add the drugs and said nothing. "She was an accomplice," I said. "More than an accomplice. She was a co-conspirator. James's testimony makes that absolutely clear. And before you ask, yes, we have corroboration. The laptop searches. The attempted prescription forgery we found in the medical records. Mary's account that Marissa refused to call for help. James's testimony is not standing alone. It's backed by everything else." That night, Detective Vega called with another update. Based on James's testimony, the DA filed additional charges against Marissa. Not just attempted murder, but also conspiracy to commit murder and accessory after the fact. An arrest warrant was issued Friday night. Marissa was taken into custody Saturday morning. This time, bail was denied. Sunday brought an unexpected development. An email from Attorney Solis landed in my inbox. Subject line, "Confidential settlement discussion." I read it standing at my desk. Solis was writing on Marissa's behalf, suggesting that perhaps there was room for a resolution without trial. Marissa was willing to plead guilty to lesser charges, perhaps reckless endangerment instead of attempted murder. In exchange, we would drop the civil lawsuit. She emphasized that Marissa was still Robert's daughter, that families should find ways to heal rather than destroy each other. I stared at the screen for 30 seconds. Then I deleted the email. Mary found me there a few minutes later. What was it about? Marissa's lawyer, suggesting we take a deal and drop the lawsuit. What did you tell her? Nothing, I deleted it. Mary sat down across from me. Good. Don't let her pretend this is negotiable. She tried to kill me for money. That's not something you compromise on. Monday morning, I forwarded a screenshot of the deleted email to George Harrison with a simple message. No deals, no compromise. Proceed to trial on all charges. Harrison replied immediately. Understood. I will communicate that to the DA's office. Marissa's lawyer will get the message. The civil suit continued its parallel track. With the asset freeze in place and Marissa facing more serious criminal charges, Harrison filed additional motions. One sought to establish joint and several liability, which meant that if we won the civil case, James would be liable for the full $2 million, even though he had taken a plea deal. The criminal reduction did not absolve civil responsibility. That same day, the bank accelerated foreclosure proceedings on Marissa and James's house. With no mortgage payments for 3 months and frozen assets preventing any payment, the bank moved to seize the property. An eviction notice was issued, 30 days to remove belongings. I heard about it from David Stevens, who was still monitoring their financial situation. "They're losing everything," he said. "House, savings, whatever equity they had. The civil judgment will attach to whatever is left." Which at this point is basically nothing. "They gambled everything and lost," I said. Not with satisfaction, just mechanical observation of consequences. The next week moved quickly. James's formal plea agreement was signed on July the 2nd. He testified in court, admitting under oath to conspiracy to commit attempted murder. He detailed his and Marissa's plan. He accepted 8 years in prison. The judge accepted the plea. Marissa's preliminary hearing was scheduled for July the 10th. Based on James's testimony, the laptop evidence, Mary's account, and the falsified prescriptions, the judge would decide if there was sufficient cause to proceed to trial. Harrison assured me it was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. But Marissa would be there, in court. For the first time since her arrest, I would have to see her face. Wednesday night, July the 4th, Mary and I sat on our back porch. Fireworks exploded in the distance, neighbors celebrating. We watched in silence. "Are you ready for next week?" Mary asked. "For the hearing?" I thought about it. Seeing Marissa in the defendant's chair, hearing the charges read aloud, watching her realize how completely her plan had failed. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The story broke on July the 6th. I was having morning coffee with Mary when the local news station opened with it. "Daughter and son-in-law charged in poisoning plot, inheritance motive alleged." The coverage was different this time. No careful neutrality, no framing of both sides, just evidence. Court footage showed Marissa and James being processed. The anchor detailed the falsified prescriptions, the laptop searches, the $1.5 million inheritance calculation. A legal expert appeared with a grave face, calling it one of the most ruthless cases in recent history. My phone started vibrating. People I hadn't heard from in weeks. The same friends who had questioned my judgment after Morales' media campaign were now calling to apologize, to express shock, to say they had no idea the evidence was so damning. I didn't answer most of them. David Stevens called mid-morning with updates on Marissa and James's professional situations. "The real estate agency cut ties this morning," he said. "Public statement expressing sympathy for your wife and completely distancing themselves from Marissa's alleged criminal activities. James was fired yesterday by the dealership, morality clause, and his parents issued a statement disowning him." I took notes as he spoke, treating every detail as case information instead of victory. Employment terminated. Professional reputation destroyed. Family relationships severed. Consequences, not vengeance. "They're completely isolated now," David said. "No jobs, no social circle, no family support." In the following days, I learned more through various sources. Former friends stopped returning their calls. Neighbors avoided them in public. James's parents' statement was particularly cold. "We are devastated by our son's actions and choices. We stand with the victims in this tragedy, and we have no further relationship with James." Formal, absolute, final, I understood it. They were protecting themselves from association, drawing a public line between themselves and their son's crimes. It's what parents do when their child turns into a monster. I wondered if strangers saw Mary and me the same way. Parents who had somehow produced a daughter capable of murder. 8 days after Marissa's arrest, I found a letter in the mailbox. Not through lawyers. Sent directly by mail. I recognized Marissa's handwriting on the envelope immediately. Mary saw me holding it. From her, I nodded. We went inside. I opened it at the kitchen table while Mary sat across from me. 3 pages, handwritten. Marissa's voice bled through every line. Daddy, please. I know how this looks. I know what I did was wrong, but everything just spun out of control. The debts, the pressure, James's gambling. I wasn't thinking clearly. I never actually wanted Mom to die. I panicked. I'm so sorry. I have always loved you both. You are my parents. Please, isn't there a way to fix this? Can't we be a family again? The letter continued in that vein. Part confession, part excuse, part desperate plea. I read it twice, looking for genuine remorse. I only found self-pity and manipulation. She was still framing herself as a victim of circumstances, rather than the architect of an attempted murder. I slid the pages across the table to Mary, without comment. She read in silence, then looked up. What are you going to do? I went to my desk and wrote a reply by hand. 1 page. Brief. Marissa, you had a choice that night. You chose to watch your mother die rather than call for help. You chose money over her life. These were your decisions, made with clear intent, as the evidence shows. There is no fixing this. There is no family to return to. My attorney handles all future communication. I signed it, sealed it, and prepared it for delivery through George Harrison's office. No direct contact, no opening for negotiation or emotion. Harrison called that afternoon with another update. The civil trial is scheduled for July the 15th, 5 days from now. With the criminal pleas being finalized, the judge wants a quick resolution. We'll get the full judgment, $1.5 million. They'll never pay it, of course. They're filing for bankruptcy. The point isn't the money, I said. I know, it's the public record, official acknowledgement of what they did and the debt they owe. It follows them forever. That night, I sat in my study, reviewing the civil case file one last time. Documentation of everything. Medical bills totaling $197,000. Mary's suffering quantified in hospital days and therapy sessions. Lost time measured in weeks of unconsciousness and months of recovery. Behind me, the door opened quietly. Mary was there. Stronger now. Firm on her feet without the hesitation I had seen weeks ago. The trial is in 5 days, she said. I nodded. She crossed the room, sat in the chair beside my desk, the same position we had maintained through this entire ordeal, partners in the prosecution. Will you need me to testify? I asked. She considered it. If it helps ensure they are held accountable? Yes, I'll do whatever it takes. Her voice carried no fear now, only resolve. I reached for her hand. She took it. The courtroom on July the 10th was smaller than I expected for what the media had called one of the region's most shocking cases. Judge Harrison presided, her expression neutral as the clerk called the matter. State versus Marissa Miller and James Miller. Marissa entered first, wearing a gray suit that looked borrowed, probably from her new attorney. Her face was gaunt, eyes red from what I assumed were sleepless nights. Or tears. Or both. James followed her, separated from her physically and legally now. His plea deal had already been signed, but he was present for Marissa's arraignment. The charges were read aloud. Conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, first-degree attempted murder, obstruction of justice. Each charge carried its own weight, its own maximum sentence. Totaled up, they meant Marissa faced 25 years to life. Her attorney, Solis, entered a plea of not guilty. Standard procedure, even when the evidence was overwhelming. The trial date was set for September the 12th, 2 months away. But as we left the courthouse, Harrison pulled me aside. The DA believes Marissa will change her plea before trial. Once she sees James's full testimony and the evidence discovery. Once she understands how completely the evidence destroys her defense. She'll take whatever deal they offer. No one wants to face the jury with this case. He was right. 3 weeks later, on July the 31st, Marissa accepted a plea deal. Guilty to second-degree attempted murder, 15 years minimum, possibility of parole after serving 12. The judge accepted the plea on August the 4th. I was in the courtroom for the sentencing. Mary was at my side. We sat in the second row, close enough to see Marissa's face when the judge spoke. Ms. Miller, you planned and executed an attempt to murder your own mother for financial gain, Judge Harrison said. You researched the methods, you obtained the means, and when your victim was dying, begging for help, you refused to act. The only reason your mother is alive today is because a neighbor had the decency and courage that you lacked. Marissa's shoulders shook. Tears fell. But whether they were of remorse or self-pity, I couldn't say. 15 years in state prison, the judge continued. You will be eligible for parole after 12, but that is not guaranteed. It is entirely dependent on you showing genuine rehabilitation and remorse. Qualities I saw no evidence of today. The gavel fell. Marissa was taken into custody immediately. I watched the officers escort her out a side door. She didn't look back. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to see. James's sentencing occurred the same day. Despite his cooperation, the judge gave him 8 years, acknowledging his testimony, but noting that he was the principal actor, the one who actually administered the poison. He would be released in 2033 if he served his full term without parole. The civil trial was almost anticlimactic after the criminal convictions. With guilty pleas on the record, the civil judgment was a formality. Harrison presented our case on August the 15th. Medical expenses, pain and suffering, emotional distress, the permanent impact on Mary's health. The defense offered no real dispute. What could they say? Judge Garcia awarded us $1.5 million, the full amount we had requested. Collecting it was impossible. Marissa and James had filed for bankruptcy. Their house had been foreclosed on and sold at auction. The bank accounts were empty. Future earnings would be garnished, but prison wages barely covered the commissary. We'll never see a dollar of it, Harrison admitted afterward. But it's on the record. Public acknowledgement of the harm done and the debt owed. If either of them ever makes money, inheritance, lottery, a book deal, whatever, we can pursue it. The judgment doesn't expire. That night, Mary made dinner. Simple pasta. Not the dish Marissa had poisoned, but close enough that the parallel was not lost on either of us. We ate in a comfortable silence, the kind that comes from shared understanding, rather than empty conversation. Do you regret any of it? She asked after we had cleaned up. The lawsuits? The prosecution? Cutting her off completely? I thought about it honestly. No. I protected you. I ensured they faced consequences. I would make every choice again. Even knowing she's your daughter? Especially knowing that. She used family as cover for attempted murder. That makes it worse, not better. Mary nodded slowly. I feel the same way. I thought I might feel guilt or doubt by now. but I don't. Just relief that it's over. We stood at our living room window, looking out at the city's evening lights. The city continued its normal rhythm. People heading home from work, cars flowing along the highway, life proceeding as it always had. But for us, everything had changed. Not in obvious ways. We still lived in the same house. We still had the same daily routines. But the foundation of our world had shifted. We had faced something most people never encounter: betrayal from within the family. An attempt on the life of someone who should have protected it. And we had survived. More than survived. We had secured accountability, built protections, created consequences. The inheritance Marissa had tried to kill for would never touch her hands. Our wills now directed everything to charity. The house she had counted on inheriting would benefit strangers instead. Was it worth it? Mary asked quietly. Everything we lost? We didn't lose everything, I said. We lost a daughter who was willing to kill you. That's not a loss. That's the removal of a threat. She leaned against me. I suppose you're right. August turned into September. Life resumed its patterns. Mary continued physical therapy, regaining the strength she had lost during hospitalization. I returned to occasional consulting work, helping young prosecutors with complex cases. We had dinner with friends who had supported us through everything. The media moved on to other stories. Marissa and James became footnotes, cautionary tales about greed and family betrayal, but no longer headlines. Sometimes I thought about the daughter I had raised, the girl who had sat on my shoulders at the beach, who had called me for advice, who had once been someone I trusted completely. That person was gone. Had she been gone a long time? Probably. I had just been too close to see it. What was left was a woman in prison serving 15 years for trying to murder her mother. That was the truth of what she had become. Accepting it wasn't easy, but it was necessary. One afternoon in mid-September, Mary and I stood at the same window where we had stood after the civil trial. The view hadn't changed. The city lights still stretched out below us, indifferent to our history. Do you think about her? Mary asked. Sometimes, I admitted. Mostly I think about what might have happened if Mark hadn't called for help. If you had died that night and they had gotten away with it. But that didn't happen. No. Because we fought back. Because we refused to let them rewrite the story. Mary turned to look at me. Thank you. For believing me. For fighting for me. For not letting family loyalty overrule the truth. Mary, I said, you are my family. You are who I protect. We stood together in the growing darkness, survivors of something that should have destroyed us, but didn't. The wound would never heal completely. Scars like this don't fade. But we had ensured that the people who caused it paid the appropriate price. That was enough. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.